Introduction. Have you ever been called cold just because you finally decided to stop saying yes to everything? Have you been told you've changed simply because you stopped allowing others to take advantage of your kindness? If yes, you're not alone. In fact, Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, would say that what you're experiencing is not coldness. It is individuation. It is the process of becoming whole, of learning that your energy, your time, and your soul are not infinite resources to be drained by anyone who asks. This is the story of boundaries, not walls that lock you away, but bridges that protect your soul. And today, we're going to explore this through the wisdom of Carl Jung. Why boundaries are mistaken for coldness. When you begin to set boundaries, people notice, but not always in a positive way. Some may say, "You've become distant, you don't care anymore, you're so cold." Why? Because many people are used to the old version of you. The version that was always available, always willing, always saying yes. They benefited from your lack of boundaries, so when you finally reclaim your space, it feels to them like a loss. But here's the truth. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming clear. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about defining where you end and where others begin. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And part of accepting yourself is realizing that you're not here to sacrifice your soul for the comfort of others." Carl Jung's insights into the self. To really understand why boundaries matter, we need to explore Carl Jung's psychology. Jung believed the human mind has layers, and each of these layers affects how we relate to others. Persona, the mask we wear for society. It's the good guy, the helpful friend, the always available version of ourselves. Without boundaries, the persona dominates. We smile while inside we're exhausted. Shadow, the hidden part of us. When we don't set boundaries, the shadow builds. Resentment, we say yes outwardly, but inwardly we feel bitterness, anger, and even hatred. Individuation, Jung's term for becoming whole. This is the process of bringing balance between who we are inside and who we present to the world. Boundaries are a key tool for individuation because they allow our true self to emerge instead of the fake, people-pleasing persona. Boundaries, then, are not selfish. They are psychological hygiene. Just as you wouldn't let anyone dump trash in your living room, you cannot allow people to dump emotional or mental garbage into your life. Jung argued that without individuation, we remain stuck in a half-life, pleasing others but betraying ourselves. He believed that each person must face their shadow, their needs, and their true voice. Setting boundaries is one of the ways we honor that journey. The cultural fear of no. Think about it. From childhood, many of us are taught to obey, to agree, to fit in. Saying no feels like rebellion, and rebellion, in many cultures, is punished. So we grow up believing, if I say no, I'll lose love. If I set boundaries, people will abandon me. If I choose myself, I'm being selfish. Jung would argue that these fears come from the collective unconscious, the shared cultural conditioning that shapes our behaviors. But individuation requires courage to break free from these unconscious chains. When you set boundaries, you're not being cold, you're breaking an inherited pattern. You're stepping out of the collective good child archetype and into the empowered adult archetype. And yes, it's scary, but Jung believed that true growth only happens in discomfort. Saying no feels uncomfortable at first, but it's the discomfort of growth, not guilt. Boundaries as a spiritual practice. Most people think of boundaries as practical, saying no to overtime, refusing to lend money, or limiting social media use. But Jung saw the psyche as deeply spiritual. For him, boundaries are sacred acts. When you set a boundary, you're essentially saying, my soul has value, my time matters, my energy is not endless. This is not rejection of others. It's respect for the self. And paradoxically, when you respect yourself, you create healthier, more authentic relationships. Because people are no longer connecting with your mask. They're connecting with your real self. Boundaries, then, are acts of love. Love for yourself, and love for others who now get to meet the true you, not the exhausted actor wearing a smile. Transition. So, if you've ever been called cold because you set a boundary, remember, you're not cold. You're courageous. You're not distant. You're becoming real. And as Jung taught us, individuation, the path to wholeness, always begins the moment you decide to honor your truth, even if others resist. Practical ways to build boundaries. It's one thing to understand the philosophy of boundaries, but it's another to practice them. Jung always emphasized that knowledge without application is incomplete. So how do you actually set boundaries in your daily life? Listen to your body. Your body often knows before your mind does. If you feel tension in your stomach when someone makes a request, that's a signal. If you feel drained after spending time with someone, that's data. Your body is a compass. Follow it. Practice the power of no. No is a complete sentence. You don't always need to explain, justify, or apologize. If someone asks for your time and you don't have the energy, simply say, I can't. The less you justify, the more natural it becomes. Start small. You don't have to transform overnight. Begin by setting boundaries in low-stakes situations, declining a minor favor, turning off your phone after work, or protecting one weekend for rest. Each small act builds confidence. Expect resistance. When you first set boundaries, people will resist, not because you're wrong, but because you're breaking old habits. Stay calm. Stay consistent. Resistance is proof you're doing the work. Communicate clearly. Healthy boundaries are not about aggression. They're about clarity. Use calm, direct language. I can't talk right now. I'll call you tomorrow. Or, I'm not comfortable with that. The more straightforward you are, the stronger your boundaries become. Honor your own boundaries. The hardest part isn't saying no to others. It's saying no to yourself. No to overcommitting. No to pleasing for approval. No to betraying your needs. When you respect your own limits, others learn to respect them too. The freedom that comes from boundaries. At first, boundaries feel heavy. You worry about hurting others, disappointing friends, or losing relationships. But over time, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel free. Free from resentment. Free from guilt. Free from the exhaustion of living a double life. This freedom allows you to show up in relationships with authenticity. You're no longer giving because you have to, but because you want to. And that difference changes everything. Carl Jung often spoke of the importance of balance. Too much giving without boundaries creates chaos. Too much isolation creates loneliness. But boundaries create balance. They allow you to stand firmly in yourself while still connecting with others. Boundaries don't kill love. They purify it. They strip away obligation and reveal truth. Boundaries and individuation. Individuation, in Jung's psychology, is the process of becoming whole. Uniting the conscious self with the unconscious, the light with the shadow, the mask with the true self. Boundaries are essential to individuation because they force you to step out of the persona, the role society wants you to play, and into your authentic self. When you set a boundary, you're telling the world, I am not just a role. I am not just your helper, your listener, your provider. I am a whole person, with needs, desires, and limits. This declaration is frightening for those who prefer masks. But for you, it is liberation. It is the step toward individuation, toward wholeness. Jung would say that boundaries are not about isolation, but integration. They allow you to integrate your shadow, your anger, your fear, your need for space, instead of repressing it. And once integrated, You live more fully, more truthfully, more powerfully. A reframing of boundaries. Instead of seeing boundaries as rejection, let's reframe them. A boundary is not saying, I don't love you. It's saying, I want to love you without losing myself. A boundary is not, I don't care about you. It's, I care about me too. A boundary is not, I want distance. It's, I want honesty. With this reframing, boundaries stop looking like coldness and start looking like respect. Closing thoughts. If you've ever been called cold because you set boundaries, remember this: you're not cold. You're finally respecting yourself. You're finally stepping into individuation, the process Jung described as the journey of becoming whole. Yes, some people will resist. Yes, some will walk away. But those who remain, those who see the real you, will love you not for your performance, but for your truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors, doors that open to healthier relationships, deeper self-respect, and a life where your energy flows where it truly matters. As Jung might say, the act of setting a boundary is not an act of coldness. It is an act of courage. It is the soul finally saying, here I am, whole, real, and free. Why people misinterpret boundaries the moment you begin to protect your energy. The world around you shifts. Some people will applaud you, but many will resist. Why? Because your boundaries highlight the imbalance that has always been there. If you were always the listener, the giver, the one who solved everyone's problems, then the people around you got comfortable in that dynamic. They didn't see your kindness as a gift. They saw it as your duty. And when you suddenly shift that duty into a choice, they panic. This panic gets expressed as accusations. You don't care about me anymore. You're being selfish. You've changed. But in truth, what you've changed is not your heart. What you've changed is the script. You're no longer reading the role they assigned you. Jung would say that when you refuse to play the unconscious role others project onto you, you force them to confront their own shadow. They wanted you to be endlessly available because they feared being alone with themselves. The psychological cost of no boundaries. Let's pause and imagine a life without boundaries. You say yes to every request, every favor, every demand. On the outside, you look helpful and kind. But what happens on the inside? First comes exhaustion. Your body feels heavy, your mind overwhelmed. Then comes resentment. You begin to secretly dislike the very people you're trying to help. And finally, comes emptiness. You've given so much of yourself away that you no longer recognize who you are. Carl Jung believed that ignoring our inner needs leads to neurosis, a kind of deep inner conflict that eventually shows up as anxiety, depression, or even physical illness. When you betray yourself long enough, your psyche rebels. It whispers through sadness. It shouts through anger, and sometimes it collapses through burnout. Boundaries, therefore, are not luxuries. They are lifelines. They keep you aligned with your inner truth so that your giving is authentic, not forced. Without them, even love becomes toxic, because it's drenched in resentment instead of freedom. Myths about boundaries. There are so many myths surrounding boundaries that it's no wonder people hesitate to create them. Let's look at a few. Myth 1. Boundaries are selfish. In reality, boundaries are the opposite of selfishness. They allow you to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. Myth 2. Boundaries push people away. Actually, they bring the right people closer. People who truly value you will respect your limits. Those who only wanted to use you will drift away. Myth 3. Boundaries mean you don't care. No, they mean you care enough to stay healthy and honest. Without boundaries, you end up lying, pretending to be okay while silently breaking down inside. Myth 4. Boundaries make you rigid. Healthy boundaries are flexible. They are not walls but filters. They allow love and connection in, while keeping toxicity out. Jung would remind us that every myth hides a psychological truth, the myth of selfishness. For example, hide society's fear of individuality. People fear boundaries because they fear people who think for themselves. A boundary breaker cannot be controlled, and that unsettles those who prefer obedience. The role of the shadow in boundaries. Jung's concept of the shadow is essential here. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we've rejected: anger, pride, desire, fear. Often, people pleasers repress their anger. They say yes to avoid conflict. They smile when they want to scream. But that anger doesn't disappear. It hides in the shadow, and when the pressure builds, it erupts in explosive ways: sudden fights, passive aggression, or silent resentment. By setting boundaries, you integrate your shadow. You allow yourself to say, I am not always available. I have needs. 2. I will not betray myself just to make you comfortable. This isn't cruelty, it's wholeness. Boundaries transform anger from a destructive force into a protective shield. Instead of exploding at the wrong moment, you calmly express your limit at the right moment. This is emotional maturity. How boundaries redefine relationships. One of the most fascinating effects of boundaries is how they transform relationships. At first, there may be conflict. People may resist, complain, or even walk away. But over time, something remarkable happens. Your relationships become healthier. Why? Because boundaries filter out manipulation. They leave behind only those who genuinely respect and love you. Without boundaries, you attract takers. With boundaries, you attract equals. Jung believed that true connection comes from authenticity, not performance. When you set boundaries, you stop performing the role of the endless giver. You show up as your true self, and this gives others permission to show up as their true selves too. So yes, some relationships will end, but the ones that remain will be real. And real connection is worth far more than endless fake approval. Transition. When people call you cold for setting boundaries, what they really mean is, I can no longer control you. They're mourning the loss of the old script. But you don't exist to play roles for others. You exist to live your truth. Carl Jung taught us that wholeness comes not from pleasing the crowd, but from listening to the quiet voice within. And that voice will often say, protect your energy, respect your limits. You are not here to be consumed.